Thank you for anyone who joins in to watch this stream today. Just give me 1 second. Send out a couple of links here. So thank you to anyone who tunes in to watch this Freebird Media live stream. I appreciate you taking the time to watch it. So the subject I wanted to talk about in my live stream tonight is a figure known as Chris Langan, who some people think is the world's smartest man, and his theory of reality, which is called the CTMU. And I want to make people aware of this because I think that personally it's a giant scam, and I want to show people the evidence for why I think that, and then talk a little bit about grifters on the right in general, because media and politics is filled with crap on both sides, and the modern progressive left is just filled with all kinds of toxicity and garbage, but so is the right. It's actually filled with it, and I have a bunch of friends who are fans of Chris Langan. They're in his Facebook group, and they support him in various ways. I have a book here, one of Langan's books. This is Christopher Langan, The Art of Knowing, Expositions on Free Will and Selected Essays. So I went down a little rabbit hole about 9 months ago, and I got really into Langan for a bit, studying him, listening to a whole bunch of interviews with him on podcasts, bought and read this book by him, and went through everything online with him with a fine-tooth comb. At first, I was really intrigued by what he was saying. It made a lot of sense on the surface, but as I went down the rabbit hole, I realized that he, in my opinion, is absolutely a fraud and a grifter, and he's taking a lot of money from people, and it upsets me. And it also upsets me because metaphysics and spirituality is a topic that I am quite passionate about, and I feel that a lot of people are searching for genuine answers to these things, and they get misdirected when they get taken advantage of by con artists. And I'll get into theory about, or more depth about what the CTMU is and how he runs his grift, and I'll walk you through the evidence and stuff. But afterwards, I'll give you a couple of we'll talk about the sources that he plagiarizes, and if you're interested in this stuff, where else you can get more kind of in depth on some of the stuff he talks about. Just right off the record, right off the bat, though, I'll tell you the CTMU is basically him taking a bunch of components of different things and jumbling them all together, and then developing sort of a cult following, of which he collects money from these book sales. His books are garbage, by the way, that he sells on Amazon, and was collecting Patreon donations, so his Patreon got shut down, and various other ways. So basically, the CTMU, he borrows a lot from the Bible, or he sort of claims to be Christian, but if you follow his stuff long enough, it's incoherent. He borrows a lot from the holographic universe. He talks about symbiosis, a lot of Hindu concepts, and he talks a lot about teleology, which is something that you can learn about there's different aspects of teleology and different ideas that you can look into. But Sheldrake's morphogenics is one form of it, and those are all stuff that I'll get into and kind of elaborate on in a second. But this is Chris Langan on the left, and he markets himself as the world's smartest man who grew up with a background kind of like the guy in Good Will Hunting. He was dirt poor, and he was too smart for modern academia, and he's also a jacked bodybuilder. So that's sort of his claim to fame, and he says that he didn't have the opportunities or the finances to go to university, and now he wouldn't go to university anyway because, the academics, as he calls them. And, there's a lot of cults and scams going on the right. So I'll say that typically con artists like this mix up a whole bunch of truth in with their garbage. So there's a lot of talking points that he latches onto on the right that are legitimate, but he's basically just mixing in his own crap with them. So I'll say right off the bat, I think he's on steroids. I don't think he's this world's smartest man. I think he fabricated those tests and got a journalist to write a piece on him, basing his persona on the guy in Good Will Hunting, and I think it's all um, made up basically. And then he markets this CTMU idea, which is extremely incoherent, and I think that he has extreme narcissistic tendencies. So he's a fraud. One of the things that I found that was really intriguing, give me 1 second here, is I actually supported his Mega Foundation for like $3 a month or something on Patreon for like a month. The same month, when the first month that I was sort of really into his stuff and going down the rabbit hole, and when I ordered this book and bought it, before I kind of realized what was going on. So one thing I'll show you also is, give me a sec here. There's a Patreon page that someone else set up for $1.50 a month. I subscribed to it. I didn't need to, after I went through it, I didn't need to continue, so I unsubscribed, and then I subscribed again recently to get some more information. But if you doubt what I'm saying, and I'm not going to show the Patreon page like on my feed because I don't know if I can legally do that. It's sort of a paywall. But you could go to this Debunking Chris Langan, the CTMU Patreon account, pay your $1.50 if you're not satisfied with what I'm going to show you. And it's a trove of interesting information about this guy. I think that his wife, Gina, is really his business partner. And they both seem to be very, very toxic people. And there's also a Facebook group that anybody can join. Let me see if I can find it here for a second. So yeah, if you go to the Cognitive Theoretic Model of the Universe Facebook group, you can scroll through this and you'll see what I mean, because basically one thing that's obvious to me is that this guy has an extreme narcissism. He has to the point of having a personality disorder. And another thing about cults is when you get a following like this, and I would describe it as a cult, the people in the cult, once they're committed to it, will do all kinds of mental gymnastics. So if you really go through the comments and the things that are being said in this group, it's mostly complete gibberish. And Langan has a bunch of terms like syndionesis, and he talks about tellers and teleology and stuff like that. And it's a word salad of stuff. But people will always basically say, and this is something that I can show you in other cults too, but basically they'll say, if you don't understand this theory, you just don't understand him enough, or he's not wrong, or he's not contradicting himself, you just don't understand what he's saying. But I submit to you, if you spend a certain amount of time just listening to him talk, he contradicts himself all the time. And, I'm sure that his cult is basically mostly young men. He also combines a lot of alt-right politics with his sort of spiritual shtick into one package. And I'll just, I'm looking for some examples of here that I'll give you, of the kind of nonsense that goes on in this page. So, basically he uses a lot of buzzwords, and he's strung together a lot of, he's smart enough to have gone through a lot of stuff and plagiarized a lot of stuff and kind of brought it together into sort of one package that he can market, but it is gibberish. So I tried to get, there's a big controversy on his IQ tests if they're legit. I've never found anything that actually confirms that they're real, and there's a lot of controversy online and people saying that he's a fraud, which you can look at for yourself if you're interested. But I'll also show you, basically I think he's been running this cult for a long time, and I also think that he's wealthy. So he markets himself as someone who is poor, and that's why people are always donating money to him. But the truth is that he's probably worth millions of dollars, and I'll tell you why I think that afterwards. And is basically complete fraud that people are giving money to. Where's my OBS here? So his grift goes back more than 20 years ago. When he first formed the Church of Teleology of Multiplex Unity, which is a corporation that he owns, and I think this is where he makes the majority of his money. and he was sued by other people. And there's some court documents that I got online from that I found that basically show that he was sued by uh, some other people in a group for high IQ people that he was in, and they were alleging that he was had built a cult around himself basically, and I found it very very intriguing. Um, so yeah, I think that he is intelligent, and he's early on, decades ago, he figured out how to form a cult and register it as a corporation, and then start marketing himself and build this fake persona, which people get attracted to. He kind of blends being this ultra alpha male guy because I think he's on steroids, but he's like a bodybuilder. Combined, he says, with the world's highest IQ, around 200, 6 standard deviations from the norm, he says. And he says John Wheeler, the physicist, sent him a postcard asking him to come and talk to him, but he had to work and he was poor and he couldn't go. But there's never been any proof of that either. All of his claims, when people ask for proof, he just sort of he doesn't ever give any kind of actual proof, and that's another thing I noticed about him, as well as tons of contradictions in his actual theory, as well as extreme narcissism. Because if anyone criticizes him, he takes it very personally and he gets very nasty. So does his wife, which is apparent on his Facebook page, which is not something that usually goes along with spiritually evolved people. And then on top of that, there's another thing with cult leaders and grifters. They usually, he is claimed, you can go, I can show you stuff online, but he basically claims to be divinely inspired, that God talks to him, that he's seen UFOs, and that he has basically said, like, he has a Messiah complex. God has chosen to channel this information through him for him to give the world in the form of the CTMU. And that's also why people donate money to him, because he says he's using that money to continue to work on this. But months ago, I emailed him asking if he would give Freebird Media an interview, but I got a reply from his wife who basically said, like, they're doubling down on their work and they're not doing any kind of press or interviews at all, which I think is probably because they are running a cult and they're not sincere about anything. But if we go back to put this picture back in here for a second. If I pull up the page that someone else set up debunking Langan, it's a gold mine of evidence, which is interesting. And I started to realize, like, if you go online, some people have estimated his net worth to be as high as $20 million. He does live on a farm. Let's see, a 100-acre ranch in Missouri. A single acre of land in Missouri costs roughly $3,700. Multiply that by 150, and Langan's sitting on over $500,000 worth of land. So just, estimating some things here. There's pictures too of his property here. The stuff that is public information. Langan doesn't live in the old city. His ranch is full of lush greenery, even has its own lake, which increases the value significantly. Now take into account multiple buildings both on and off Langan's ranch, his wealth, his combines, and you're looking at millions of dollars. In a BBC documentary, Langan was seen riding a combine harvester through his many acres of land. The average combine harvester costs over $100,000. Just a FYI. Langan is known to own at least 3 ostriches pictured below. An adult ostrich costs between $7,500 and $10,000. So when this guy, who's constantly presenting himself as a down-on-his-luck blue-collar janitor and bar bouncer, like the guy in Good Will Hunting, who desperately needs your money, he definitely doesn't need your money. And if you're donating the money, you're not actually contributing to anything. The CTMU is word salad gibberish, and his books are crap. One thing I noticed about his books too, like, I bought this book. I wanted to hear what he had to say on free will, so I got this one specifically. And it does technically say The Art of Knowing, expositions on free will and selected essays. But the majority of this book were first of all, I didn't understand his opening essay about free will. I didn't understand. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't know what he's saying. So it's not that I'm stupid or that I don't understand this. I read it several times, and I'm good with English comprehension, and I'm well read in metaphysics, and I don't have a clue really what he's saying. but then he gets into immigration. He talks a lot about immigration. He's also clearly a racist, and I say that as someone on the right who's constantly called a neo-Nazi and a racist, and I'm not. So I understand how like people throw that word around. But I mean, this guy, he's a nasty guy, and he's very bitter. Um, in my mind, he kind of is the human personification of all the like the things on the right that you want to like avoid. Like he complains about not being able to find a wife and have children. He got turned away from a sperm bank because he was too old, and then he was complaining that women would rather, basically was saying, young women would rather breed with black guys than breed with him, even though he's got like this super high IQ because he doesn't have any money. He's just, trust me, if you really were that smart and you were a big muscle guy, and there's no reason you wouldn't be getting laid unless you had a really shitty personality, which he does. And clearly a narcissist. There's also evidence of him being has a criminal record. He's definitely a fraud. People like this, they have a long paper trail and long history. He's not taken seriously by any actual. He's not published in any real journals or taken seriously by anyone because he is, anyone that is actually sophisticated is gonna recognize this. He's definitely had troubles with the law for minor things like operation of motor vehicle with expired license. That's one thing. Pass vehicle on the right and traveled off main portion of road. So like reckless driving and stuff like that. But then there's also evidence that he beats his wife. And then so his wife Gina, I noticed like in their Facebook page, if you offend them, they'll instant or criticize them or even ask questions, even in, like just like in a way that you don't understand something. They will freak out. They will call you a troll. They'll say you deserve to die. In this case, Gina, they package a lot of, so they kind of market the CTMU now. There's layers to this too. On the surface, there's just the CTMU, and it's kind of like their metaphysical ideas. And then once you get more into the rabbit hole, like the Facebook groups or into the inner Patreon tiers, then it becomes more of a cult. And it's basically, they're mostly Christians. They talk a lot about Jesus and how Jesus is truth and the CTMU is truth and stuff. But then they mix in a bunch of New Age concepts too, and the power positive thing. So they'll actually put a hex, like they'll have a group like meditation on a Facebook commenter and try to send bad vibes their way and stuff like that. So like these people are just super toxic and like they're definitely not spiritually evolved people, and they're intelligent insofar as they can put together a decent cult here that's probably made them a lot of money over the last 25 plus years. But it is a cult. And I'll show you guys. So, yeah, he's rich. When I was looking into their Patreon account last March, April, it was still up and running, and they had a significant amount of patrons donating. They had 416 patrons that were all donating like at various tiers. So they would have been making a huge amount of money per month just on Patreon alone. Not to mention any book sales he gets from these really shitty books that he self-publishes that are basically just small essays on alt-right talking points combined with the odd metaphysical speculation, as well as the actual organizations that he either has or has had as corporations for the CTMU and the Mega Foundation. He claims that his wife is also extremely high IQ, and they run this society for other high IQ people, and that's why they need money to just work on their ideas outside of academia and stuff like that. I just really dislike this guy, this kind of person, narcissistic, shitty, dishonest, and it's not even that he's just grifting money from people, but he's grifting money from people, and he's also filling their heads full of nonsense, which sets people back that are really searching for something real, Sorry, so just going back to, let me pull up Safari again. So yeah, you can see that he had 416 patrons at one point. He's not making any money now because Patreon, like I went to log in when I was actually paying to the CTMU Patreon, and it was just gone one day. Patreon had obviously has taken it down for some reason. They claim they just got censored, but I think Patreon figured out that they were running a scam or something, because their Patreon account is no longer functioning. But they did it earlier in the year, this year even, have 416 patrons donating various amounts of money. If you look at his Facebook page, like I was saying, it's there. Eventually, here's an example of the kind of dialogue that will go on here. One guy will say, if God created the universe must be determined. Chris said that the universe is indeterministic, but the free agency of God is the causal agent which cannot be undone, therefore the universe is deterministic. And someone says, no. Chris proposes a third option, self-determinacy, which differs from both determinacy and randomness. Take a look. Disclaimer, this wiki is not affiliated with Chris Langan. Someone else says, Chris has never ever said that the universe is strictly indeterministic or strictly non-deterministic. God, being the source, is self-determined, and the universe is a product of his self-determination. Since there's nothing else other than, and it goes on, and it's just person after person saying, simpleton thinking. It's just people saying, like, you don't understand his work, or he didn't say that. So even though he clearly contradicts himself all the time, one of the obvious ones for me was his take. He said multiple different things on hell, whether or not hell is a real place or not. Now his position is it's a real place, and if you do certain things, you lose your metaphysical soul forever. And in other examples, he said that hell is more of a metaphorical place. Richard Dawkins would end up in a place where everyone just ignores him, so it's where your own kind of personal fears manifest. And he's just had basically very different answers for that in different contexts and different places. But then when people call him out on this, his fans just seem to back him up and say, like, no, he didn't say that, or you need to read this more. But I spend a lot of time going through the CTMU, and it's a bunch of, it's not a coherent thing in and of itself. He's basically plagiarized a bunch of other sources, and I'll go over those in a second too. Here's another example of a narcissist. Comment. You get me interested with comments like this. Anyone who denies that the God described by the CTMU as the God of the Bible is telling you that the God of the Bible is not the God of truth, but the father of lies. Why not instead say, great question, seems like you're trying to reconcile things. Here's a YouTube video I posted, or please refer to CTMU page, blah, blah, blah. Did you receive my entire comment? And Langan responds, you seem like a nice and thoughtful fellow, but when I do someone the favor of answering a question, I expect it to be absorbed without criticism of its delivery. I usually interpret such criticism as trolling, even when it's indirect. He goes on. Thanks for the clarification. I hope you're not accusing me of ramming angry indoctrination down your throat. People ask questions, and when I notice them and have the time, I answer them my constraints. Many questions are asked in the form of a magnum opus, which contains not just one question, but many. When I state the question I'm answering, but not the others, it's because I want my readers to know that this is the specific question I've chosen to answer. He basically just goes into these long-winded responses. Sorry, I think this is the one that I meant to read. So basically he says that his CTMU God is the same God as the Bible, but remember, he also combines this with New Ageism, law of attraction, and all kinds of other stuff that has nothing to do with, that my Orthodox Christian friends would be very opposed to, for example. This is the one I meant to read. This is why I think this is the kind of thing that makes me think he's narcissistic. The fact that he even take the time to post this. Comment. Hate to tell you, boss, but it's not about you. Every time I've seen you blame the establishment, you make it out to be some kind of personal vendetta, but the reality is it's not about you. He definitely has, he thinks that the world is out to get him, and everything is about how, he's been wronged and blah, blah, blah. No one is stealing your ideas. Believe it or not, things can be independently discovered many times by many people, hence why many names for the same ideas. Your ego is consuming you. As you've said, those with your intellectual ability can fall into the danger zone, and you're in it. You shut down those who disagree or misunderstand you as trolls. Response. I've taken a lot of criticism in my life, all kinds of it. There are many kinds of criticism. You learn to ignore some of them. One kind that I find hard to take seriously is the kind that specializes in me while ignoring the attacks, which are, everyone that criticizes him, he has to take their time to, he pretends like he doesn't, it doesn't bother him, but it obviously bothers him. I get, take me on this channel, for example, people are constantly calling me shit all the time, and I just laugh it off. But he is genuinely, pissed off at these people, and he'll go out of his way to just, write these long-winded responses and blah, blah, blah. So you keep going. And this follower says, "I pray to God that I ever develop even a shadow of the astronomical patience, restraint, and kindness displayed by the public persona of Christopher Langan." I don't know what this guy's talking about because his public persona isn't kind or restrained. He's quite nasty, and he's not kind or restrained. And again, he's very clearly has a narcissistic personality. If you take the time, maybe not on the surface, but if you spend a little bit of time just listening to him talk and look into his stuff for a while, after a while you'll be like, no, this guy is serious narcissism. And so, what I'm suggesting is that if you're anyone that's not already like bought into this idea, if you're being objective and you just look at the behavior and the dialogue on the Facebook group alone, you can figure that out. You'll notice it's self-evident, the narcissism. So anyway, I show you this because I also show you the way people basically will defend him and do mental gymnastics if you criticize him. And some people are giving him like a lot of money, like hundreds of dollars a month. Like this guy's making serious bank off of this grift that he has going. Someone here says, have any of you looked into the idea of morphic resonance from Rupert Sheldrake? It seems to coincide with telic recursion. Thoughts? Morphic resonance is a form of teleology. I really like Rupert Sheldrake, have for a long time. This is a great book, Science Set Free, 10 Paths to New Discovery. I recommend it, and I recommend looking into Sheldrake. His work on morphogenics is a form of teleology. Teleology means that like the universe is purpose-driven, and that there's a purpose at the end that's an attractor that's pulling us towards it. So Rupert demonstrates this with biology, with plants and stuff, showing you that like plant development, plants develop towards an end goal in ways that aren't codified in the genes, and that interrupting it in certain ways, it will find a creative way to still reach the same outcome. So I can do a whole other stream getting more into that idea, but basically I think that this person's picked up on that because clearly Langdon has plagiarized the idea from Sheldrake. On that note, sorry, just a sec. Minimize this for a second. Oops. Give me 1 second. Oh, sorry guys, there's a bunch of comments. I'm just seeing you guys now. Thanks for joining. So I just see someone saying, who's this? Chris Langan. This is the guy that some people think has the world's highest IQ, and I think he's a fraud. And then they basically think that a lot of people give him credit because they think that he's a blue-collar, working-class alpha male with the world's highest IQ who talks about proving that God exists and through his CTMU theory. So, cool. Someone says, I've never been in here. First time ever. Never heard of Freebird Media until now. Well, I'm glad you found this channel. Hopefully you like it. If you look at my older content, that gives you a bit of an idea of what this was for. So, one commenter says, is he a Chew? That is an accusation made in the Exposing Chris Langan Facebook page. Yes, I've seen some claims and evidence that he is, and it wasn't 100% like, I wasn't sure it was completely real. It could be doctored, right? But I suspect he is. He also has an alias, Eric Hart. So I think he probably has that ethnic background. I think he's on steroids, fabricated his IQ test results, has a narcissistic personality, and has put all this together to make a grift in the form of the CTMU, which people donate money to, even though he's already a millionaire. That's what I think based on what I've seen, and I think his theories are plagiarized from other sources, and I'll give you an example. Sorry, I always get these comments that some people are struggling with my audio. Sorry, you know what? I was actually using the wrong mic, so this might help. Okay, let me know in the chat if my audio just got better. I hope you can hear me all right. Sorry, I apologize for volume problems. Let me pull up the exposing Langan Patreon. So, I'll give you guys specific examples of some of the sources that he has plagiarized, and specific ideas and concepts. So, definitely has borrowed a lot from various Hindu thinkers, and I recommend, if people are interested in metaphysics, just studying Hinduism in general. Rene Gagnon is a right-wing personality and a traditionalist, kind of like Julius Evola, who's a good intro to studying the Hindu doctrines. He basically borrowed, starting with a book on Hindu philosophy by David Peter Lawrence, published 3 years before Langan's CTMU, papers based on Hindu writings from ancient times. There's a link here on Amazon to the book. The ideas that he plagiarized were: we all share an identity with God. Reality is essentially linguistically structured. Reality is a closed system consisting only of the mind of God. God is both transcendent and immanent in the world. The division of reality into a triad, and our identification of reality's identification of itself. He also borrows a lot from Neo-Platonist philosopher Plotinus. The concepts from that he plagiarized are multiplex unity and unbound telesis, two buzzwords that he uses constantly. He also plagiarized two medieval Indian philosophers, Utpaladeva and some other name I can't even try to pronounce. Plagiarized ideas from this text: no external mind, independent reality, perceptions are identical to what is perceived. I borrowed from George Berkeley's idea of philosophical idealism: we all exist inside the mind of God, ultimate reality is a language. I'm an idealist myself, those are my metaphysics, and a conscious monist, so I do believe, these are all concepts that I do believe in, but I'm just showing you where he gets his buzzwords from and the basic ideas. The philosophy of Professor Errol Harris: basically everything in this CTMU is a ripoff of his ideas. Michael Talbot's 1991 book, The Holographic Universe, he plagiarized the concepts of holology and syndianesis. The next stream I do after this stream is actually going to be an introduction into the holographic universe theory, but they're talking about this book by Michael Talbot. Very fascinating. Talks about, I'll do another stream on that, on why people think the universe behaves like a hologram. Back to ideas. Professor Sean Majid's philosophy of relative realism. He plagiarized the idea of self-duality, self-representing theory, and laws of physics are constraints placed on the universe. Bernard Longren's proof of the existence of God, 1904 to 1984. This guy, he was a philosopher. Langan plagiarized his idea: self-creation is a paradox, universe identifying itself, actual and potential duality, necessity of actual coming from potential existence must inhere in reality, blah blah blah. These are all just within the Patreon page that I have access to. They give you the links to all this stuff, and then with screenshots here from what he's borrowing. And there's a bunch more examples, but basically this is a breakdown of everything that he plagiarized for the CTMU. And there's a bunch of other really fascinating stuff in here about his cult followers and their behavior. So, in theory, I wanted to bring he kind of got some. I knew guys on the right that were always sharing a tweet that he put out years ago, talking about average IQs and Coco the gorilla's IQ compared to the average Somali IQ, and he was basically talking about mass immigration and why he thinks that gorillas should be treated with the same rights as Africans, if they're sub-Saharan Africans and stuff like that. Basically, he reps a lot of alt-right talking points. Some of them have some truth in them, but coming from him, it's just easy. It's an optics thing again. It's like the other stream I did. Everyone on the right that seems to get a large platform has some element of toxicity to them that's going to make them unappealing to people that aren't already on the right. which I think does a disservice to the talking points that they're trying to actually represent. So, also notice the psychology, because there's some other grifters on the right I'm going to get into, and there's similarities, and so I can see how people that grift in the manosphere and in fringe right politics, there's the same type of angles that they take that appeal to these people. And yeah, I recommend this page. Basically, I think that this appeals to a lot of men on the right, because Langan absolutely claims to have proof of God's existence and absolute certainty derived mathematically. So people are often uncomfortable with uncertainty. They like concrete answers. They like alpha males. That's why he's always bragging about. He's a big guy, right? He's probably 300 pounds. He does bodybuild. So there's no correlation between being a big, strong bodybuilder and truth when you're in a philosophical or intellectual debate with anyone. There really isn't. For some reason, guys on the right seem to think there is. So this guy, he appeals to people on the right, especially because he blends Christianity, a subtext of Christianity, in with his ideas. He presents himself as the ultimate alpha male, and he's extremely critical, of establishment academics, which I am too. So people, they see the truth in the corrupted academia, and they want to believe in what he's saying. So some people get drawn in, and then they become cult members, and they start giving them tons of money. And I feel really bad for those people, because they've gotten scammed. Now, jumping to another person on the right who I think is also a con artist, is this guy, Vox Day. Vox Day is similar. He's always claiming, he talks very slowly, and he's a former American libertarian who got in some legal troubles, and now he lives in Italy. And he also, followers with cults tend to have names for their cult members. So Owen Benjamin, for example, has the Bears. Vox Day has his, I forget what he calls them, the Dark Army or whatever he has, but he has a phrase for him. It's extremely lame to ever call yourself, like, people that put like bear in their name on social media because they're like an Owen Benjamin fan. Don't do that. It looks super cringe. Vox Day does the same stuff though. He talks about having a super high IQ without ever actually showing documentation for it. He's 5 standard deviations. Langan is 6, but this guy is super smart, not really successful in anything, but he claims to be a former political commentator and computer programmer, video game designer, blah blah blah. Revenge of the Sis, which is a podcast or a YouTube show I really liked. It tons of videos breaking this down. His games are retarded. Everything he does is kind of broke. He created this thing. He works with Owen Benjamin. He wrote a book criticizing Jordan Peterson. Some of those criticisms are valid, and some of them I think are taken out of context. Peterson does cry a lot. Usually tears of empathy, though, more so than just inherent effeminacy. But grifters on the right tend to pick up on that. When I actually realized that Vox Day was 100% full of shit was one day I was listening to one of his dark streams, and he was talking about Joe Rogan. He was talking about how he has a background in karate, and how he could, beat, basically saying he could beat up Joe Rogan. And whatever you think about Joe Rogan, yeah, he's not a super intellectual and whatever, but he's very rich. He's on TRT, and he's been training in martial arts from a young age, and he still trains today in both. He was a kickboxer and striker, and he still trains in BJJ with guys. He could fight a lot of actual professional fighters. In no universe can Vox Day fight Joe Rogan. It's just, he can't. And if you believe that he could, then you're really naive about martial arts, or you don't train yourself, or you just, to anyone who's a real martial artist, or even following the stuff like Vox Day, he's out of shape, he's old, and the fact that he would even make that claim and his followers would believe him is sad. But this is another guy. He's created scams too, unauthorized TV, things that don't work, crappy quality comic books he's produced. Although that's not so much a scam, it's just putting crap on the free market. But he's definitely done scams with unauthorized TV. That he's been in legal trouble again. That's why he had to um, flee North America. He also identifies in some podcasts as a Christian nationalist. Again, plays the Christian angle, but then over time kind of shifts around, or you can tell he's not actually that dedicated to it. It's a grift. It's part of the package, and it does suck people in, and they really believe what he's saying. Vox works with Owen Benjamin a lot, and so one thing that is similar between Chris Langan, Owen Benjamin, Vox Day, is narcissism for sure. Constantly telling the audience, I'm super smart, I'm super high IQ, I'm super alpha, I get lots of chicks. In the case of Owen Benjamin, he's always pointing out that he's very tall, and so on. If you don't know this by now, guys who are alpha don't ever call themselves alpha. So, and typically guys that sleep with a lot of women don't always have to talk about their body count, and there's a lot of projection that you'll start to recognize from these guys. And Owen Benjamin lives on a farm now. He's got his cult of bears that give him a lot of money, and Vox Day has his fans that donate money to him and his shitty products. And these are all kind of personalities that are on the right. People like that they all criticize the radical left. The radical left is, it's fucked up, but it's also self-evidently so. So mixing in real, doses of real stuff and real talking points with other garbage is what these guys do. Owen Benjamin has gone on some crazy rants, basically was a flat earther or toyed with the idea, believes that Monsters Inc. and Pixar movies like that are satanic and horrible. He won't let his kids watch any Pixar movies. I find that truly sad. The older Pixar movies like Toy Story, Monsters Inc., WALL-E, that stuff, I guarantee you, is, if there were subliminal messaging in it, it's not obvious enough that it actually has any effect on anyone. When I was a kid, I watched all those movies with my family. They're just great family movies. They're a lot of fun. If you're so far down a rabbit hole of being paranoid about Illuminati stuff that you can't enjoy a movie with kids, like if you're a parent and you can't let your kids watch Monsters Inc., I just feel bad for you. He's also told people to drink turpentine and all kinds of weird stuff. So again, maybe not obvious on the surface, but if you take time and you listen to him for a period of time, you'll start to notice all kinds of inconsistencies. This also seems to be it seems like he's addicted to speed or some kind of amphetamine, which probably explains how he streams for so many hours in a day. But Owen and Vox are partners in many, or have been partners, and then I've actually seen recently, I think Owen's claiming that Vox ripped him off, so they might have had a falling out, but that would be par for the course, I think. So Owen is friends with Vox, Vox used to be friends with Stefan Molyneux, who's also a grifter, who has convictions for some crimes that he's done, and been caught being dishonest and also narcissistic and toxic. So, I keep going, and I have friends who either are or have been big fans of all of these guys. So I always feel bad because it's clear to me that they're getting completely scammed, basically. Molyneux's toxic. Molyneux has done interviews and kind of like been worked with Lauren Southern, who's another grifter. And that's another thing that I get frustrated with guys on the right, is that they're usually, my right wing friends just will say a lot of them are walking contradictions, because they'll assert that women don't belong in politics at all, but then as soon as a young woman comes along who's attractive, that is willing to talk or represent right wing talking points, they suddenly think that she's like the second coming of Christ and start throwing money at her. She's made a ton of money grifting naive young men on the right. So, and then knows when to cash out and knows how to play the game. So these are all personalities of narcissists who recognize the opportunity to represent talking points that inflame people and inject their own personalities into them, and basically exploit naive people out of a lot of money, usually through crowd surfing. Patreon is the big one for people like Lauren Southern. Mostly, a lot of these people get deplatformed and then they find other ways of doing their grift. But they're all toxic to some degree. Just like Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate says a lot of truth, but he also combines it with a lot of toxicity, and he is basically a pimp, a narcissist, an asshole, someone I wouldn't want to hang out with. So I have friends who hate feminists, and they're like working class guys like me, so they're always dealing with bullshit from the progressives. So then when they hear somebody come along and start like talking the way Andrew Tate does, they get kind of like enamored by him, and they love that he's taking on the feminists and stuff. But he's also, it's a mixed bag with Andrew Tate. So these are all personalities that like they make me embarrassed in a sense to be associated with the right sometimes, because everyone on the right, like these are just the grifters, right? In another stream I talked about, like even just think of the actual people involved in politics. You got Travis Patron, who was leading the CMP, who's got convicted of beating up two women basically, who turned him down at a bar. You got Raging Dissident, who I like, but says the most inappropriate stuff sometimes. It talks about raping Pierre Poilievre's wife, which optics-wise is terrible for people then on the right, or the fringe right, or PPC type of people like me. When I got very political around 2016 and I started becoming more like part of the new right, a lot of my normie friends who didn't really understand the nuance of the culture war just saw me. They're like, "Oh, Van Ham's like right wing now. Like, what happened to him? He used to be so smart. Like now he's just super cringe." Because everyone that they see on the right is cringe. So I did understand why they would lump me in, and I'm always wishing that somebody could come along and rep masculinity, but in a positive way, and be a sophisticated intellectual as well, who could talk with some class and represent these controversial talking points without coming across like a complete toxic, narcissistic asshole. And I rarely, if ever, find that or see that anywhere, which is just sad. So guys, let me check the chat one more time, just in case I'm missing any comments. Let me know if the audio's improved on the stream at all. Hey, and Ryan, great to see you guys in the chat. Okay, sorry, I'm just checking this now. Sorry, give me a second here. Just taking a minute to load the comments. I'll try to. Actually, maybe I can check. For some reason, the chat in the studio is disconnected tonight, so I have to open up another window and look at the comments that way. I'm not sure why. So sorry, just give me 1 second. Okay. Anamf said, "Hey bro, you got your bunker ready?" So I do. Anamf and I have been talking. We were talking last week about nuclear war and speculating on how bad it could be, and if there'd be any point in trying to survive a war. In truth, the bunker that I have is not meant to survive nuclear fallout, and I wouldn't want to anyway. So the whole thing is kind of LARPing. I just think it's cool to have a secret bunker, and I enjoy going there when I'm home and talking about prepping and everything. But in reality, I don't think I want to. I'd rather die in the nuclear war than have to live in the aftermath of it personally. Ryan says, "Many right-wing talking points are synonymous with left-wing ideology when played out to its philosophical conclusions, i.e. eugenics, racism." Yeah, there's a huge amount of crossover there. I'll definitely give you that for sure. Says, "Kernels of truth don't imply that one is a reliable pursuer of truth." Yep, totally agree with you there, Amph. Ryan says, "Showing sorrow greater than showing mirth in public." Yep. I have to admit, bully citing Owen into the JQ for months was fun. Okay. Owen Benjamin is a perfect example of a spurg who went hard on, like Ronnie Cameron, went hard on the JQ, super hard, predictably got deplatformed, and then, complained about it. Kind of used that as a way, I think, to get people to sympathize and send him even more money. But I mean, what if you have any kind of intelligence, you can predict that, right? Like what he was doing was definitely going to get him deplatformed. So the JQ is the most delicate topic of all. So you can't, you got to be really careful about how you deal with it. Basically, if you want to stay on a platform. Yeah, someone says Owen Benjamin mixes truth with falsehood. It's a sign of an agent. So definitely, he definitely does that. Vox does that. All of these examples of right wingers basically do that, which is how they draw people in. It's not that everything is bullshit. They do talk about a lot of real stuff. Um, Race realism. There's truth in that. Replacement demographics. There's truth in that. Um, but the way that they talk about it and then mix in their own toxicity with it doesn't do the right any good long term in my view. And I focused more on Langan than the other ones because he annoys me the most, just probably because I spent money on one of his books and he's the fakest of all of them, I think, and probably has the most money and is the most narcissistic. I just really dislike people like this, and bitter too. It's funny because he's also proof that, like, even if he was authentic, having an IQ of 200 and being a big muscle guy, like this guy definitely doesn't get any action from women, and he's very bitter about it. Also, it's very that's another thing about like the MGTOW movement, because I myself am pretty black pilled, especially when it comes to dating women. I'm not naive. I've been around the block. I understand the dating game. I understand evolutionary psychology. I understand female nature and male nature. I get all this stuff. And I have frustrations too as a working class guy. But one thing I never do is like go around talking about, just in public, just talking about how toxic women are and blah blah blah. It never gives you a good image. Sorry, Ryan says, Alex, who are some guys you'd recommend? Who isn't grifting these days? Great question. Before I went live, I was actually trying to make a list of that. So one guy I like on the right is Marcus Folan, who also known as the Golden One. I have his book Dauntless on the shelf over there. He's technically not a bodybuilder, but I call him a bodybuilder. He's an aesthetics guy. He's big weightlifter guy that he's always trying to shape himself like a statue. Like he's got this great physique kind of thing. And he's very traditional. He's in Sweden. He is a pagan, but he's not anti-Christian. He's more about representing European bioculture. So he wants the Christians and the European pagans to kind of come together in a it's a racial thing, really. It's white Europeans are being replaced, and he wants them to assert their masculinity and not be replaced and stuff. So I like the Golden One. He is more socially conservative than I am. Like I'm still a bit of a punk party animal guy. Like I've partied. I'm not super monogamous. I'm obviously not married. I'm trying to word this in a way. When I say I'm not monogamous, that came across wrong. I'm not one of those guys that says that everyone's life purpose should be to be married and have kids by the time you're 27. Otherwise, I'm not like that, and I'm not as socially conservative as the Golden One is. But I do respect the Golden One. I think it'd be super cool to hang out with him and have a beer with him. I recommend his book. In the masculinity department, he's pretty based, hard to go wrong. So I'd recommend the Golden One as someone that I do respect on the right, who's not a grifter. It's hard to come up with more names. I think that Rebel Media and Gavin McGinnis are basically grifters. Milo Yiannopoulos, basically a grifter. There's intellectuals like Thomas Sowell, who I like, but he's also ancient, and I imagine he's not long for this world just because he's got to be really old. I'm curious for people watching this in the chat, if anyone who do you guys like on the right? Who's worth following? This is almost why I've gone in my own direction, because there aren't a lot of other people on the right that I really respect. And it's actually going to take me a while to... I have a book on the shelf by Jared Taylor, and Jared Taylor gets a lot of flack too. People think he's a racist, but I've read his book. when you listen to him represent himself in his own words, I really actually do respect him, and I don't think that he's racist in the way that people pejoratively call him a racist. Um, yeah, someone says Gavin, Milo, and Rebel were the biggest grifters. See, they did, and I liked the Rebel back in 2016 because I'd go to events and they'd be there, like the Jordan Peterson stuff, and they'd be the only non-mainstream entity there, giving it kind of like its due. So they would provide good coverage against a machine, a giant, industry of mass media that is propaganda, and so I would respect them for kind of countering that. But then they themselves are definitely grifters. I went to an event one time called the Rebel Live at some Christian church, and it was basically like a bunch of fear mongering to seniors, and they were marketing something called the Rebel Cruise, like go on a cruise ship for a week with all these people to support the rebel, and like really scare, just working old people up with the basic talking points, like you're going to be replaced by Muslims um, in your own country, and this stuff, that xenophobic stuff, like this stuff is all nuanced. There's truth to, I'm against mass immigration. I'm a race realist, but the way that these grifters spin it is done in such a way as to exaggerate the problems and scare people so that they can extract money from them. That's basically what is going on. Says the European right has reached a dead end. The economic, cultural, and social decoupling with Eurasia means, in effect, that Europe will become a tourist spot, fully deindustrialized and a mere backwater. That's interesting to think about. Like, what you might be right. Like, their industries are going to be fucked. So seeing what becomes of Europe in the next decade is going to be really interesting. And Ryan says, I mostly consume Catholic content. Kennedy Hall is pretty good and local to Southwest Ontario. His show is called The Kennedy Report. He wrote a book on masculinity called Terror of Demons. Interesting. I really want to check that. I'm going to make a list of that. If you're watching, we should talk about Islam soon on a stream, or maybe you can help me find someone, because I've talked to Fanny Anzai about her materialism. I've talked to Ryan about Catholicism. I want to talk to someone about Islam, and then do more streams on my own sort of metaphysical stuff. And I'd like to get into someone who's more nuanced on either a Jungian scholar or someone who knows a lot about Eastern philosophy as well. Where did my book go? So the thing with Langan that I started this off with is my big passion really is metaphysics and philosophy. Someone that I can definitely recommend that I really like is Bernardo Kastrup. He's like my main guy right now, and this is the book I'm reading by him. He did a Decoding Jung's Metaphysics. So I am an idealist, meaning I think that that reality and the universe are essentially mental constructs within one giant consciousness, which we can call God, the mind of God. So I do think that basically there is no external I'm not a dualist in the sense of there being a physical reality separate from consciousness. I'm a monist. I think that it's a false dichotomy. So I believe in God, and I believe that we're all a part of God, and that we all have our individual soul, and and then we talk. We can speculate or talk about different digital physics or holographic theory or whatever about how this simulation, for lack of a better word, that we're all in works, and stuff like that. But I'm not dogmatically religious, although most of my friends are. I'm whether you're Orthodox or Catholic or a Muslim, most of us are united against a materialist paradigm, because if you are intelligent enough to really comprehend things properly, materialism, it is by definition nihilistic, and I don't think the human psyche can really handle that. Carl Jung said it best. Our subconscious definitely believes in God and the afterlife, and Fanny is a friend of mine as well. I respect her, but I think that she's just very wrong in her philosophies. I don't think there is objective values in the materialist universe, like I've said before. So I tend to be, I refer to myself as a spiritual person who's not into organized religion. But if you make a binary between the materialists and the people that have a spiritual background, I'm clearly on the side of the people that believe in God, and I put God in quotation marks because that word means a lot of different things to different people. But from my idealist perspective, There's a lot of room for meaning. In fact, reality is not meaningless. It's literally nothing. It's composed of nothing but meaning. Um, and I like Bernardo as a philosopher. He's got a background in computer science, 2 PhDs, one in philosophy, and he's doing another PhD now, I think in philosophy of mind specifically. He's done books on decoding Schopenhauer's metaphysics, Jung's metaphysics. I'm really big into Jung right now. Really big into just everything. Like I read the because of Langan and the CTMU wormhole. Then I ended up rereading the Holographic Universe. That put me on to this book that I recommended to Ryan about Catholic mysticism. I personally am really into the phenomenon studying of near-death experiences, so I recommend the book Life After Life. And then, as a monist or an idealist, get into Eastern stuff. Read the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is basically their understandings of the near-death experience from an Eastern cultural perspective. Study the Hindu doctrines, study the Vedas, study teleology, morphogenics. Rupert Sheldrake's stuff is really worth looking into. Carl Jung stuff. I got a few books by Carl Jung. I want to get his book on Kundalini Yoga. And the Holy Bible, I mean, everyone should, even if you're not a practicing Christian, it's just I have a copy of the Quran that Omf sent me on my shelf that I'm really, really thankful for, and I need to spend more time studying it. It's the same with the Bible, but I want to become very, very familiar with the Abrahamic text. So the Bible and the Quran, the Hebrew Bible. This is a King James Bible, but just I'm not a Catholic, so I'm not a dogmatic Christian, but I do believe in the allegories, the truth of the allegories in those things. So if you're genuinely interested in metaphysics, completely skip anything to do with Chris Langan, and there's some other cults I'll do in another stream, skip all that stuff and look into this stuff. Look into the Western tradition, Christianity, Islam, Judaism. Look into the Eastern side of things with Buddhism, and before that the Vedas and Hinduism. Ryan Post says, remember to get a non-heretical Bible before you read it. So my approach would be to get multiple Bibles, not just one. I wish I knew more about. I've been watching lectures on the Hebrew Bible. My Bible is a King James Bible, and I want to get a Catholic Bible. Which, correct me, Ryan, if you're watching, I think that the Catholic Bible is literally the exact same as the King James Bible with 4 extra small books in it, Deuteronomy maybe, or something, some other. It's the exact same plus, or that you could say the King James Bible is the Catholic Bible minus one specific part, if I understand that correctly. Says, happy to chat in the future, bro. We can talk about Islamic civilization, its relationship to the other civilizations on the planet. Definitely would love to have that conversation with you. And says, if you want a full great books list of Western civilization, you can check out Professor Argulis's list. Yeah, so Omphas and I were talking months ago, and he's been doing this course studying the great works of the Western canon, and he wanted me to join in because there's like online classes and discussion group and stuff, and I really, really wanted to, still want to in the future. I'm just sort of, I've got this terrible lifestyle going right now where I work in Norfolk for a week for my dad, and then I come back to Toronto and I kind of do some odd jobs here, and I'm like all over the place on a daily basis with work and stuff, and also like I won't get into details, but I basically had to really conserve money this summer, so I unfortunately wasn't able to jump in on that course, but it really looked appealing, specifically for Western. I mean, even you already are, but a few years from now you'll be a very formidable intellectual, because you definitely are going to be well read on Western civilization, and I'm sure that you spend a good amount of time with Islamic stuff as well. So as the years go on, you're going to be a well-rounded polymath, so hats off to you, dude. This is not at all. Oh, so this is kind of interesting. You might find this this book I was pointing out, Introduction to the Study of the Hindu Doctrines, is by Rene Ganyan. Oh, he's a big name in traditionalism on the right, right up there with Julius Evola. But he ended up becoming a Muslim, wrote a bunch of books on like Hinduism, and was born in Europe in a Catholic family, European Catholic family. Has an interesting story. You can Wikipedia him, but ended up becoming corresponded with a lot of authorities, I guess, in Hinduism and Eastern philosophy. Wrote a bunch of books on it, and then later became a very, very, very devout Muslim until the end of his life. And wrote a bunch of books. Just here, some of the other books he wrote: The Great Triad, Symbols of Sacred Science, Insights into Christian Esotericism, The Crisis of the Modern World, The Multiple States of Being. I'm looking for one, East and West. Man and His Becoming According to the Vedanta. So he had a pretty firm, and he's a well-respected. Some people would say, well, he's a European. How much can he really know about Hinduism if he's not from India? Like, he was respected even by scholars in India, and he's one of the few people that they tend to endorse and stuff. So this guy was well read on Catholicism, Hinduism, and then obviously Islam later on. The thing, see, from my perspective, Catholic mysticism and the near-death experience of a secular Western person today, and the experiences of the Tibetans and the Bardo Plains, I think that there's truth in all of it. So unlike a materialist atheist who denies it all, or a religious person that says only, like a Catholic would say, only the Catholic mysticism is real, not the Book of the Dead or New Zealand. I think that they're all experiences that souls or individual consciousnesses have had within this giant reality, which is all mental in nature. And I think that it's, personally, I think that mostly when you get to reasons, it's speculative, but it's probably a combination of God is getting, from the Eastern idea, it's God is infinite, it's exploring itself, getting to know itself, what it likes, what it doesn't, or if it's all one thing, it gets lonely, and it gives itself a dance of life by perceiving itself as multiple beings, or evolving itself towards pure love or perfection through the simulation it runs through us. I tend to differ from, the fundamentalist Christian, because I don't think hell is a permanent place of torture. I think that the whole thing is just a simulation to evolve your mind. I really don't know what kind of personal hells await, the truly vicious rapists, murderers, things like that. I suspect when I die, my experiences, I'll probably be, if I had to speculate on what I think happens when I die, there'll probably be a transition phase, Jesus Christ, because I was raised with that. I believe in Jesus as an archetype. I think I'll probably communicate with God in the form of Jesus talking to me before whatever transition happens mentally. I think there's two basic ideas with this. One, we either die and we merge back with the light, which is God, and we sort of lose all individual identity and merge with the light, or we merge with the light but retain some form of individuality. Obviously not exactly the same as our human personality, because what age would we be, what mental thing, but there is some sense of I-ness as an individual unit that you maintain. I think a lot of us, you can reincarnate depending on what the point is, or you can just merge with the light, or exist in a more enlightened place that probably has been interpreted by heaven, or as heaven, by people in near-death experiences. Ryan says the KJV is missing 7 books and uses contemporary Jewish Bible translation, whereas the Douay Rheims uses the Septuagint. Pardon me, I'm unfortunately I don't know how to pronounce these words. Protestants literally got their Bible from the Jews who rejected Christ. And says, we are doing the Vedas in great books of the East and Plutarch's Lives in great books of the West at the moment. That sounds awesome, man. I really want to get in. We'll talk again when the stream's over, and I'll check the thing for when the next semester or however it works, because you're right, Anf and I were talking before, with these kind of works, you have to discuss them they're meant to be read and digested and then discussed in a group to really understand them. That's true. There's only so far you can go. Like, I'm like an independent kind of guy, so I'm just reading and watching YouTube videos solo. But when you have a discussion group, it helps tremendously. Um, I don't know. It says you can hop in now. The admission process has now been simplified. Okay, we'll talk after this stream then, because maybe I'll be able to get in on that. But yeah, this stream, I thought it would be good to do the stream tonight on mainly on Langan and right wing grifters, just to warn people, like people on the right, for some reason they really do get like played by these kind of personalities, and that makes me sad. But then also, just talking about Langan's CTMU got me back, like months ago when I was reading it, got me back into holographic universe, and then that opened up the gate to a whole bunch of texts and ideas and metaphysics. There's a bunch of theories of like reality, right? That there's simulation theory, which is that all of physical reality can be best modeled as just digital information. There's holographic universe theory, which is that the universe behaves like a hologram. There's integrated information theory. There's panpsychism. There's all kinds of these metaphysical ideas, which are inherently spiritual. Like that's the thing about the word spiritual. Like when you're talking about metaphysics and reality, pure awareness, or pure subjectivity, or pure being, it's just a part and parcel of the universe. It's sort of the fundamental thing, and nobody really knows what it is. It just seems to be a non-local phenomenon that is sort of the fundamental reality of things. And for lack of any other better word, that's a spiritual thing. So all of these sort of more advanced metaphysics are inherently spiritual by their implications, which I actually find extremely comforting. I'd like to think that I'm dedicated to truth no matter what it is, but nihilism, I don't think I can sustain that intellectually. It would send me into a deep depression. So it seems convenient to me that there's good news in this journey, in that I think that materialism can absolutely be invalidated. Time and space. Donald Hoffman's another guy that's really good to check out his YouTube videos about this, but time and space are not fundamental. I understand why, although it's hard for me to paraphrase right here, but basically I'm doing this stream, and then I'm going to do the holographic universe theory next. This is a quote. Basically, let me give you a little preview about holographic. There's nothing about it either that necessarily doesn't, like, you could be a Catholic or a Muslim and still believe in the holographic universe, because this is really more about like how the physical universe behaves, more so, and just saying that it seems to be coming from an underlying intelligence that you could call God. So there's nothing in this itself that is at odds, I think, with religion. Basically, there's a physicist, David Bohm, and neurophysiologist, Carl Pribram. One was studying the brain, the other guy was studying physics, and they both started to notice the same thing and realized that if things were holographic, that would be a better model of the universe. Memories, how memory in the brain works, that's one big clue, I think, that the universe is holographic. And memories are not stored locally in the brain. There's a lot of reasons why we know that now, but I think that's proven personally. Let me see if I had the yeah, so when I read the holographic universe, I also I got a copy of this book, which I found interesting. I went through a little phase a few months ago where I got really into Tibetan Buddhism, but the idea of the holographic universe, there's descriptions of the universe being described as holographic in most of the ancient traditions of high, or most of the ancient civilizations of high achievement, basically, that I find fascinating. Also, I'm good. This is kind of goes over people's heads, but I'm just going to keep repping this point a few times. This is from a declassified CIA document actually from 1983, which was tied to their Stargate program, which was dealing with investigating the phenomenon of remote viewing or out-of-body experiences, which seemed to be real. I think that they've been, skeptics that are closed-minded will always say that these are explainable away in other things, but if you really go down the rabbit hole, I would say that they've proven that there's legitimacy in it. Speculating on how that could possibly be possible gets you into some interesting areas. This is a quote from the end of the CIA document. I just want to read this again because I don't think that with my metaphysics as an idealist, I don't think that there's as much as a problem or a conflict between the East and West as people think. So Ryan, if he's still watching as a Catholic, I don't think that the way Catholics perceive it and the way that Eastern people perceive the universe is as different. I'll elaborate in a second, but here's the quote I wanted to read out on the stream. I've cited this quotation because it shows that the concept of the universe, which at least some physicists are now coming to accept as identical in its essential aspects with the one known to the learned elite in selected civilizations and cultures of high attainment in the ancient world. The concept of the cosmic egg, for example, is well known to scholars familiar with the ancient writings of the Eastern religions. Nor are the theories presented in this paper at variance with the essential tenets of the Judeo-Christian stream of thought. The concept of visible reality, i.e. the created world, as being an emanation of an omnipotent and omniscient divinity who is completely unknowable in his primary state of being. The absolute at rest in infinity is a concept straight out of the Hebrew mystical philosophy. Even the Christian concept of the Trinity shines through the description of the absolute as presented in this paper. The description of energy, totally at rest, in infinity fits with the Christian metaphysical concept of the Father, while the infinite self-consciousness resident in that energy, providing the motive force of will to bring a portion of that energy into motion to create reality, corresponds with the Son. This is so because in order to attain self-consciousness, the consciousness of the Absolute must project a hologram of itself and then perceive it. That hologram is a mirror image of the Absolute in infinity, still exists outside of time and space, but is one step removed from the Absolute and is the actual agent of all creation, all reality. And the eternal thought or concept of self which results from this self-consciousness serves the... and it kind of cuts off there, but basically, yeah, when you really get into it, and even Buddhism and studying the void and the Bardo planes and this one universal self-consciousness, and you start to realize that the mind speaks to itself in metaphors. When you understand that, and then you look at different religious traditions and the wisdom that they had and how they developed, I think that they all have seen glimpses of the truth, a truth that can be synthesized into one overall metaphysics. And I think that's personally very inspiring, and it gives meaning and hope to existence, and it also promises that, in a way, I don't think that we ever truly can die. Our ego and our temporary existence in this lifetime ends, but your primal sense of I, that pure consciousness, just like the Vedas and the Hindus talked about, I think it's basically immortal. And insofar as that it's just a piece of God, and God can exist however it wants in whatever state. So I think that through this whole, somehow our free will matters, and that we're generating experience to learn or to go into some kind of giant collective memory bank that assists God in either self-discovery or evolution of God. That's my sort of spiritual thesis on what I think is going on metaphysically with reality. Ryan said, God bless, gotta run. Thanks, man. I definitely appreciate tuning in and the discussion. Both of you guys, it's just fun to be able to talk to a Catholic and a Muslim and to bounce ideas off in this stream. Now, I know that this quote that I just read you guys, this kind of seems like word salad, but if you read the whole document and go over this, it does make sense to me. Whereas when I'm reading the CTMU stuff, I can tell you that that is word salad with a bunch of contradicting and buzzwords and stuff. This is coherent if you really take the time to read it over a few times. Anam says, the world is Maya, i.e. illusion in many Hindu texts. Yes, I essentially believe that is true, that we're inside of essentially a simulation, so this isn't the fundamental reality. Your mind is primary. This is all this physical world that we share is basically information. It's an information system that we're inside of, but that's being generated from the primal consciousness of God, basically. Um, so it is Maya. It is a type of illusion. And Up says, so it is a very ancient viewpoint, debated and argued far back as 33,000 BC, for sure. This is nothing new. This is something I think that humans have been aware of, at least the more evolved ones, for millennia. And Up says, we did the Bhagavad Gita prior to the Vedas, where a lot of this, i.e. the nature of the absolute, was discussed. Fuck, see, that's the stuff I wish I could have been in that course for, to have to be a part of the group conversation. Like, that's the stuff that, the meat and potatoes that I'd really like to get into. Says Hinduism has quite a lot to say regarding said absolute personable nature. It does. And also, Hinduism, of course, is also a broad term where there are competing or different points of view within it. So there are different schools of thought within Hinduism. Some believe that you maintain some sense of personal individuality after death. Others believe that you just merge right back in with Brahman and you don't maintain any sort of personality. I think that all of our memories are retained in a sort of large collective bank. Carl Jung talked about discovering the collective unconscious. I think we're all feeding into that. And I don't dismiss it. I think there is something to these phenomenon that have been talked about and shared by people for a long time. I think there is some fundamental truth to it. It's very fascinating. See, what I also noticed is that not just me, I mean, this became self-evident to researchers, a lot of people's sort of paranormal experiences correlate with their cultural beliefs. So with near-death experiences, the near-death experience is a term that refers to this experience where people have been traumatically injured or some other ways, and they're clinically dead or they're brain dead, and they have no activity in their brain, and the nervous system is shut off, but they're still conscious. They still have a very vivid, lucid sense of awareness of their mind being active, being present. Sometimes they're hovering over their body. These often correlate or coincide with out-of-body experiences, and they often see a light that gives them a life review, and it presents itself as all loving, and sometimes they're sent back. These are typical of Westerners having near-death experiences, and if you're raised Christian, you often believe, or you're often visited by Jesus. If you're raised Muslim, in the Muslim world, they see Muhammad or symbols and archetypes and things that correspond to Islam. People that are raised Christian, people that are atheists have these experiences too, and sometimes they're they just see a ball of light, or sometimes they'll even see Jesus even if they don't believe in Jesus. I also, in addition to all of this, I also study, of course, psychedelics, consciousness researcher, right? So it seems, and a Jungian as well. It seems to me that the mind, because I believe that all of reality is essentially mental, that the mind talks to itself in metaphors and symbols. And I think that religious wisdom is allegorical. I think that thinking literally about things is a very recent development in human history, and that for most of human evolution we were communicating in terms of symbols and symbology, which probably gave birth to modern language. So I look for symbolic truth in religion, not literal truth, personally. Says the individual who breaks the reincarnation cycle goes back to Vishnu and merges with him. At least that is one reading of the Gita. So the memories go back to the world soul that has all the memory. Correct. And in Buddhism, especially in Tibetan Buddhism, again, like Hinduism has different schools of thought. Buddhism is an umbrella term. Tibetan Buddhism is a specific type of Buddhism separate from other regions that developed. Tibetan Buddhism is kind of a mixture of shamanism and Buddhism together. Buddhism, of course, growing out of Hinduism. But in the Tibetan Buddhism, you have a cycle of samsara, of reincarnation cycles, and eventually you break free of them, and then you merge with nirvana, which is like a state of pure bliss. Now, I don't know if something gets lost in translation, but I have a hard time understanding the concept of nirvana. Like, what does it mean to exist as pure bliss? Like, do you still have an ego? Do you still making decisions and having experiences or in a blissful world? In other words, I'm curious what the Christian concept of heaven is like compared with nirvana, and could they be descriptions or reports of the same thing but interpreted differently. That's what I wonder. Also on Amfa, we'll talk about Islam because I'm very unclear about still unclear about the concept of heaven in Islam and what it's like, how it's depicted. Like I think in Christianity, it's you die and then at a certain point in time you resurrect and you keep your earthly body, but in another three-dimensional realm where you can walk around, interact. You still have your ego, and in that sort of afterlife, but everything is heavenly good. It wasn't until recently that I really realized I'm not really even clear anymore on what the Western concept of heaven really is, like metaphysically, how you would describe it, what it would look like. In the Hindu school of thought, there's multiple layers of heaven, and you can go there if you have a good life, but they're also temporary. I mean, you could be there for 100 years or 1,000 years, but eventually you just keep trucking and go somewhere else or do whatever. They're not sort of a final destination, permanent state. So, all interesting to think about. It's also possible that all of these things are true to an extent to different people. I mean, you only ever really know your own mind, so some people might merge back in with the light, some people might and lose their individuality, some people might choose to retain it and semi-merge with the light. It's really hard to say. There seems to be subjective reports that come back that are similar but different, so I'm open to either possibility. I don't believe. See, the logic is pretty simple. If your mind is creating your brain, then the destruction of the brain does not destroy your mind. And once you invalidate materialism, which can be done with math and hard science like that, I can't prove God exists, but I can prove to you, or other very sophisticated people can prove to you that physical stuff isn't really real. It's when you get, that's the whole point with why people are always, like, a lot of New Agers use quantum physics as buzzwords and stuff, but really if you do understand the implications of quantum physics, the double slit experiment, the observer effect, the hard problem of consciousness, the placebo effect, and so on, you realize that all this physical stuff is information. It's a projection of mind, and consensus reality is a shared dream of billions of people we're all sharing an lucid dream somehow. So the physics are interesting. And says, this is one reading. Everyone after several reincarnations goes back and merges with said supreme reality. See, that's probably true, but then what does that mean, like, to merge with it? Like, I have a hard time conceptualizing of this, like, of what it's like to even be awareness outside of time and space. Like, I meditate, and I've always wanted to achieve samadhi, which is a state of like universal cosmic consciousness that people take decades of training to try to achieve briefly. I've obviously never achieved it, but I'd like to. I've had friends who've had ego death on psychedelics, and that's intriguing too, but I don't know what the mind is like. I don't know what it's like to exist as a pure consciousness but without an ego, and I'm very curious about that. So I will wrap up this stream soon because I kind of made my point, and now we've digressed and we're just talking about metaphysics. But for anyone who might have just joined, to just do a quick recap, I was talking about right-wing grifters, specifically a guy named Chris Langan, who a lot of people on the right are familiar with because he claims to have the world's highest IQ, and he has a theory of reality called the CTMU and a lot of followers and supporters. I think he's a fraud, and I don't believe he's the world's smartest man. I think he's just basically stealing money from people. And so I made my case on why and some of the tactics that these grifters used. And so I was advising people not to buy his books because they're garbage. I spent money on one. I read it. It's a grift. It's mostly, it was supposed to be a book on free will. It's mostly essays on things like that have nothing to do with free will, like like immigration and race and stuff. And it's just cheaply produced crap that's self-published on Amazon so he can make a quick buck. It's probably why he got kicked off Patreon and registers his religion, his theory as a church, basically. So just recommending people stay away from this guy as a grifter, and going over the sources he plagiarized. I was showing evidence like corporation numbers and stuff for or information for his company. Um, Owen Benjamin, he's got his cult of bears who give him a lot of money so that he can live this farmsteading life. This guy is so full of shit, I don't even know where to start, but I was trying to advise people to stay away from him. Stay away from Box Day, he's also a grifter. These are people that I've been fans of in the past, so it's not like I'm just coming out swinging. Usually I've been a fan of them and then I've listened to them long enough or absorbed enough of their content to start questioning things and to notice inconsistencies, and then I dig a little and then I realize how the grift goes. Um, Vox Day works with Stefan Molyneux. He's not very big anymore, but he's another guy that people get grifted by, and Lauren Southern. So just avoid these people, avoid grifters, read more of your own, look into better philosophy and metaphysics of your own, and books that I was recommending, which the next stream is going to be an introduction to holographic universe theory. Check out Michael Talbot's book, read the Tibetan Book of the Dead, study Jungian philosophy, study Christian and Catholic mysticism, study the Hindu doctrines. If you want to get into teleology, look into morphogenics and Rupert Sheldrake's work. This is a cool book. I've been a big fan of this book for a long time. Another kind of nail in the coffin for materialism, in my view. And I like this book because each chapter ends with questions for materialists. So I like that format of kind of using the Socratic method on materialists by just asking them, just basic questions. Like, I just opened this randomly. This is the end of one chapter, and there's 4 questions. Questions for materialists. This would be an example. Like, Sheldrake will write a chapter. This one was, is nature mechanical? Question mark. Kind of make his point, and then questions at the end for materialists would be, is the mechanistic worldview a testable scientific theory or a metaphor? See, I'd like to get Fanny Anside to go through and give her take on these questions. If it is a metaphor, why is the machine metaphor better in every respect than the organism metaphor? If it is a scientific theory, how could it be tested or refuted? Do you think that you yourself are nothing but a complex machine? Have you been programmed to believe in materialism? And then he'll give usually a 1-paragraph summary. The mechanistic theory is based on the metaphor of the machine, but it's only a metaphor. Living organisms provide better metaphors for organized systems at all levels of complexity, including molecules, plants, and societies of animals, all of which are organized in a series of inclusive levels, in which the whole at each level is more than the sum of the parts, which are themselves wholes at a lower level. Even the most ardent defenders of the mechanistic theory smuggle purposive organizing principles into living organisms in the form of selfish genes or genetic programs. In the light of the Big Bang Theory, the entire universe is more like a growing, developing organism than a machine slowly running out of steam. So that's just sort of a sample from Sheldrake's work in Science Set Free. But that's sort of all I wanted to say tonight. So I thank you, anyone who watched this. Thanks for watching. Thanks Anam. Thanks Ryan for the dialogue tonight. Greatly appreciated. I'll be back hopefully tomorrow with a stream on the holographic universe. And love you guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys again soon. Thanks, guys.